I wipe the fogged mirror and peer at my reflection. The wrinkles on my dark face have deepened over the last 10 years. Gray hair has almost completely replaced the black, leaving only a silver halo around my balding crown. 74 years old is no joke, especially when you're raising 3 grandchildren at that age. "Grandpa, are you asleep in there?" Octavia shouts from behind the bathroom door. "I need to comb my hair." "Just a minute, sweetheart," I reply, tightening my tie. Today is a special day. It's my eldest granddaughter's graduation. I step out of the bathroom and Octavia immediately slips inside. For a moment our eyes meet. In her eyes I see my late wife, Sybil. The same determination, the same quiet dignity. Octavia has grown so much over the years. 16 years old. How time flies. I go down to the kitchen, where the twins are already bustling about. Ambrose is trying to toast some bread, and Ensley is arranging fruit on plates. "Don't burn the house down, kid," I say, taking the spatula from Ambrose. "It's better to go to your sister's graduation without the smell of smoke." "I just wanted to help," Ambrose grumbles, but obediently steps away from the stove. "Grandpa, are you sure you remembered to charge the camera?" Ensley asks, putting strawberries on her plate. "Octavia will be mad if we don't film the whole ceremony." "I didn't forget," I reply. Although, to be honest, it completely slipped my mind. Finish eating quickly, we don't have much time. While the twins are eating breakfast, I reach for the old sideboard and take out the camera. The battery is charged, but the memory card is almost full. I start looking through old videos to free up some space. I accidentally play a recording from 10 years ago. Octavia in a colorful dress blowing out the candles on a birthday cake. She's only 6. "Happy birthday, princess," I hear Sybil's voice off camera. My heart sinks. My wife died 5 months after this recording. Pancreatic cancer took her in a matter of weeks. And then the whole nightmare began. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Ensley touches my hand, bringing me back to reality. "Yes, sweetheart," I reply, turning off the camera. "Just remembered something. I never told the kids the whole truth about how they ended up with me. They know that their mother, Helena, died of an overdose shortly after Sybil left. They know that their father, Braxton, my only son, couldn't cope with the 2 losses and disappeared. But they don't know the details. They don't know about the note left on my kitchen table. Dad, I can't do this anymore. Take care of them. Maybe you'll do better than I did." 3 frightened children and an old man barely recovered from the loss of his wife. Not the best start, but we made it. Somehow, we made it. "Grandpa, your phone is ringing." Ambrose hands me the receiver. I didn't even notice the call. "Edmund Carmichael speaking," I say, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I try to clear the memory card at the same time. "Mr. Carmichael." The voice on the other end of the line is cold and formal. "My name is Silas McHugh. I represent the law firm McHugh and Associates. I need to discuss some family matters with you." Something in this man's tone makes me tense up. I step away from the table so the children can't hear. "What kind of matters?" "I'm afraid it's not appropriate to discuss this over the phone. Can we meet in person soon?" "I can't today. It's my granddaughter's graduation." "I understand." The lawyer's voice sounds impatient. "Then tomorrow." "This really can't wait, Mr. Carmichael. We're talking about some unresolved family matters." "What unresolved matters?" Irritation creeps into my voice. "Speak plainly, damn it." "All in good time, Mr. Carmichael. See you tomorrow at my office. Is 10 o'clock convenient for you?" "Yes, fine," I reluctantly agree. "Give me the address." I write the address on the back of an old bill and end the call. An unpleasant feeling gnaws at me. What unresolved family matters could this lawyer be referring to? 10 years without a word, and now this. "Grandpa, you look pale," Octavia remarks as she comes down to the kitchen. She looks beautiful in the blue dress we picked out together. Her hair is styled in an elegant bun, just like Sybil's was at our wedding. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," I smile, pushing the worrying thoughts aside. "You look wonderful. Your grandmother would be proud of you." "And Mom, too?" Octavia asked quietly. She is the only one of the 3 who clearly remembers Helena. "Yeah," I reply, swallowing the lump in my throat. "She would have been very proud." I don't add that Helena would hardly have lived to see this day, even if it hadn't been for the overdose. Her heroin addiction had been killing her for years. Braxton was no better. Gambling and cocaine. Sybil and I tried to help, but sometimes people choose their own fate. Guys, it's time to go, I announced, glancing at my watch. I don't want to be late and sit in the back row. The drive to school takes 20 minutes. I drive my old Buick carefully, a habit developed over the years. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice Ambrose tapping out a rhythm on the door. This boy has inherited my musical talent. Sometimes in the evenings, we play music together. Me on the piano, him on the saxophone. The same saxophone I once gave to Braxton. Are you nervous? I ask Octavia, who is sitting next to me in the front seat. A little, she admits. Are you? Me? Why would I be nervous? I don't know, she shrugs. You just seem worried since that phone call. She's a smart girl, too smart for her age. Sometimes I feel like she took on the role of parent to the younger ones while I was working. Tuning pianos isn't the most lucrative job, but it's all I could find after leaving my career as a jazz musician behind. Sometimes I had to take on extra jobs, leaving Octavia with the twins. It was just an annoying telemarketer, I lie. Nothing important. You're a terrible liar, Grandpa. Octavia smiles, but doesn't press further. I park at the school and we get out of the car. The schoolyard is filled with smartly dressed families. Parents are taking pictures of their children. Grandparents are smiling proudly. Octavia and I stand out. An elderly black man with his granddaughter without parents. Although people in Alpharetta are used to us by now, I still feel their eyes on me sometimes. Mr. Carmichael, Mrs. Jenkins, the math teacher, waves at me. Octavia, dear, you need to go to the other graduates. Assembly is in 5 minutes. Octavia hugs me. No tears, okay? She whispers in my ear. I can't promise, I reply, holding her closer. Go shine. I watch her join her classmates. Memories flash through my mind of the day she first started school. A frightened 6-year-old girl who had just lost her mother and been abandoned by her father. How she cried, clinging to my arm. And today, that same girl is a confident young woman, ready for a new stage in her life. Octavia plans to go to college to study biochemistry. My smart, determined granddaughter. The twins and I find seats in the third row. Ambrose immediately starts fidgeting. Grandpa, will this take long? He asks. Quite a long time, I reply. But your sister deserves our support, so sit still. Ensley takes out her sketchbook. She even brought it with her to graduation. She's a talented girl. Her drawings adorn the walls of our house. Lately, she's been fascinated with portraits. She's especially good at drawing eyes. They always have something lively and real about them. The ceremony begins. The principal gives a solemn speech about the future and opportunities. I listen half-heartedly, my thoughts returning to the morning phone call. What could this lawyer possibly want? Could it be? No, it can't be. 10 years have passed. Braxton never showed up. Even when I tried to find him through old friends and acquaintances, there was no trace of him. I remember the day he disappeared. Shortly before that, we had a big fight. He came to ask for money again. I refused. By that point, I had lent him money so many times that I had lost count. Braxton was furious. He shouted that I had always controlled him, never believed in his talent, that if it weren't for me, he could have been a great musician. Absurd, of course. I supported his passion for music with all my might, but drugs and gambling ruined his career before it even began. And now I invite our top student, Octavia Carmichael, to the stage, announces the director, and the hall erupts in applause. I sit up straight in my chair, feeling pride replace my anxious thoughts. Octavia walks onto the stage, her posture impeccable. She begins her speech confidently, without hesitation. She talks about aspirations and difficulties, about overcoming obstacles and believing in yourself. My grandfather always said that life is like jazz. Octavia smiles, looking in my direction. Sometimes you have to improvise to create something beautiful out of chaos. 10 years ago, our family faced chaos, but thanks to our love and support for each other, we turned it into something special. Tears well up in my eyes. This girl is a real miracle. They are all my salvation. I don't know what I would have done after Sybil's death if it weren't for these children. They gave me a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to fight. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice movement at the far door of the hall. Someone has entered and immediately remains standing in the shadows. A tall, dark-skinned man in an expensive suit. Something about his posture seems strangely familiar. He is watching the stage, watching Octavia. For a moment, our eyes meet, and a chill runs down my spine. It can't be. Just a trick of the light. A trick of the imagination, awakened by the morning call. But when the ceremony ends and we go out into the schoolyard for photos, I scan the crowd again, looking for that man. He's nowhere to be seen. "Grandpa, over here!" Octavia calls to me. She is standing with a group of friends, beaming with happiness. I walk over, hug her, and pose for photos. I try to push the unpleasant feeling out of my mind. When we finally return home, it is already getting dark. The children excitedly discuss the ceremony and the party Octavia is going to later. I unload the gifts from the car. Her classmates were generous. "Check the mail, please," I ask Ambrose, pulling the last bag out of the trunk. The boy obediently walks to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. He returns with a stack of envelopes. "Mostly junk mail," he says, handing me the mail, "and some kind of official letter." A white envelope with a blue law firm logo catches my eye. McHugh and Associates, the same lawyer who called this morning. "What's that, Grandpa?" Ensley asks, peering over my shoulder. "Nothing important," I reply, slipping the envelope into my pocket. "Go inside, I'll be right there." The children leave, and I remain on the driveway, clutching the envelope in my hand. A strange feeling won't leave me. It's as if something is coming, something that will turn our lives upside down. That man in the shadows at the graduation, the lawyer's phone call, this letter. Suddenly I realize that I'm afraid to open the envelope. I'm afraid that my life with my grandchildren, this peaceful haven we've created over the past 10 years, could collapse in an instant. I take a deep breath of the evening air and decisively tear open the envelope. Inside is a short notice. "Dear Mr. Carmichael, we hereby notify you of the commencement of proceedings to contest the custody of minors, Octavia, Ambrose, and Ensley Carmichael, by their biological father, Braxton Carmichael." The paper trembles in my hands. So it was him. Braxton was back. The school auditorium was packed to capacity. The stuffy air, saturated with the scents of various perfumes, made me pull back the collar of my shirt every now and then. I sat in the third row between Ambrose and Ensley, trying to look solemn and not show how fast my heart was beating. Octavia, my little girl who wasn't little anymore, stood in line with the other graduates in a dark blue gown and square cap. "Grandpa, can she see us?" whispered Ensley, standing on tiptoe, even though she could see the stage perfectly well. "Of course she can," I replied, although I wasn't sure. In the bright spotlight, the graduates' faces looked like blurry blurs. My Octavia stood out, tall, with perfect posture, and her head held high. The school principal, an elderly, gray-haired man, read a monotonous welcome speech. Something about a bright future, about prospects, about how graduates would change the world for the better. I listened with half an ear. My thoughts carried me back to the past, to another graduation, 30 years ago. Braxton, my son, also stood on stage in the same gown. Sybil squeezed my hand and secretly wiped away her tears. We were so proud, so full of hope. "When will they call Octi?" Ambrose fidgeted in his chair. He was bored. I could tell by the way he was tapping his fingers in a complex rhythm on his knee. He always did that when he was nervous or losing interest. "Soon," I whispered to him. "Hang in there." The diploma ceremony began on stage. One by one, the graduates stood up, shook hands with the principal, and received their diplomas tied with red ribbons. I got my camera ready. I didn't want to miss the moment when Octavia received her diploma, the first of our children to graduate from high school with such distinction, the first who would definitely go to college. At 16, she had already been provisionally accepted to Emory University on an academic scholarship. My clever girl. "Octavia Carmichael!" I jumped to my feet, oblivious to the surprised looks. My camera shook in my hands as Octavia walked onto the stage. Her smile was just like Sybil's, restrained but radiating an inner glow. She shook hands with the principal, accepted her diploma, and paused for a moment, looking out into the hall. She found us with her eyes and waved. I waved back, not ashamed of the tears running down my cheeks. "Don't cry, Grandpa," Ensley said, placing her small hand on mine. "This is a happy day." "Sometimes people cry out of happiness, you sweetheart," I replied, wiping away my tears. "Your sister's a special girl." I'll be special too, Ensley said seriously. When I grow up, I'll paint pictures that will make everyone in the world cry. I'm sure you will, I smiled, looking at her serious little face. 13 years old and so determined. All my grandchildren are incredible children. Octavia returned to her place among the graduates. Ambrose, bored out of his mind, started playing a game on his phone, and I didn't bother to tell him off. Let him be. It was torture enough for a 13-year-old boy to sit through this long ceremony. My gaze wandered around the hall, noting the happy families, mothers and fathers holding hands, younger brothers and sisters eagerly awaiting the end of the boring ceremony. There were quite a few grandparents like me, but almost all of them were sitting next to the graduates' parents. Not instead of them. Suddenly, my attention was drawn to a figure at the far entrance, a tall, dark-skinned man in an expensive suit. He stood apart from everyone else, leaning against the wall, watching the proceedings on stage intently. Something about his posture, the line of his shoulders, seemed vaguely familiar to me. My heart ached. I knew those shoulders, that turn of the head. Braxton? Here? After 10 years of silence? I strained to see the man's face, but he was standing in the shadows and I could only see his silhouette. Suddenly, our eyes met. I could feel it even across the room. The man seemed to sense my attention and leaned forward slightly. For a second, the spotlight fell on his face and I caught my breath. Braxton. Older, but definitely him. My son. Father of 3 children who thought he was lost forever. I wanted to get up and go to him, but at that moment the hall erupted in applause. The ceremony was over. Graduates tossed their square caps into the air, laughed and hugged each other. People got up from their seats, blocking my view of the far entrance. Grandpa, let's go. Ansley tugged at my sleeve. Octi is waiting for us. I glanced back toward the entrance, but the man had disappeared. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a trick of my imagination, my tired mind, unsettled by yesterday's call from the lawyer. Yes, let's go. I took Ensley by the hand and began to make my way through the crowd after Ambrose, who was already rushing toward his sister, waving a bouquet of flowers. Octavia stood surrounded by classmates, smiling and accepting congratulations. When she saw us, she apologized to her friends and rushed over. Did you see that? She exclaimed, hugging me. I didn't trip, I didn't drop my diploma, and I didn't even cry. We're proud of you, sweetheart, I said, hugging her tightly in return. Her body felt so fragile in my arms. You were the most beautiful woman on stage. Grandpa, stop it, she said, pulling away shyly. But I could see she was pleased. Here, this is for you. Ambrose handed her a bouquet of modest white roses that we had chosen together. Congratulations. Thanks, little brother. Octavia ruffled his short curly hair. And you too, Ensley. She hugged her younger sister. I drew you a picture, Ensley said. But it's at home. It's a surprise. I can't wait to see it, Octavia smiled. We stood in the middle of the noisy crowd, like an island of calm. My little family. My children. I looked at them and thought about how much they had changed in the last 10 years, how they had grown up. What a miracle it was that I had managed to raise them without any experience in parenting, especially after Sybil was gone. Grandpa, are you crying? Octavia asked, noticing the moisture in my eyes. Old man sentimentality, I dismissed. Don't mind it. Her gaze lingered on me a little longer than necessary. She was always perceptive, my Octavia. She always sensed when something was wrong. Let's take a photo to remember this, she suggested, changing the subject. Mr. Jenkins, she waved to her history teacher. Could you take a picture of us? We huddled together for the photo, me in the center, the children around me. Happy faces, bright smiles. No one knew that a shadow of anxiety had already fallen on my soul. After a series of photos and congratulations, we finally left the school. In the parking lot, I glanced around furtively, but saw no sign of Braxton or the expensive car that might belong to him. Grandpa, can I go to prom with Layla and her parents? Octavia asked when we reached the car. They already offered to drive me. Of course, I nodded, trying not to show my relief. I needed time to think, to figure out what was going on. Just don't stay out too late. I won't, she hugged me again. Thank you for everything, Grandpa. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have done anything, my girl. I kissed her on the forehead. You're stronger than you think. She ran to her friend's car, and the twins and I headed for our old Buick. The drive home was silent. Ambrose and Ensley, exhausted from the long ceremony, dozed in the back seat. I drove slowly, lost in my thoughts. Why had Braxton returned? Why now, after so many years? And what was in that letter from the lawyer that had arrived yesterday? By the time we got home, it was already dusk. I woke the children, and we entered our small, cozy house on the outskirts of Alpharetta. Our home, our island of safety. "I'm hungry," Ambrose announced, heading straight for the refrigerator. "I'll make dinner," I said, taking off my jacket. "Ensley, dear, could you set the table?" While the children were busy with their things, I went out on the porch, pretending to check the mail. In reality, I needed to collect my thoughts. The air was warm, filled with the scents of jasmine and magnolia. The neighbor's dog barked lazily, greeting me. I opened the mailbox, not expecting to find anything interesting. But among the advertising flyers and bills was another official envelope. It had the same logo as the law firm McHugh and Partners. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside was a short but official notice. "Dear Mr. Carmichael, we hereby notify you of the commencement of proceedings to contest the custody of minors, Octavia, Ambrose, and Ensley Carmichael, by their biological father, Braxton Carmichael. A hearing in this matter is scheduled for Wednesday, May 20th at the Fulton County Courthouse. Please bring documentation proving your right to custody of the aforementioned minors. Sincerely, Silas McHugh, attorney for Braxton Carmichael." The paper fell from my hands. Braxton wanted to take the children. After 10 years of absence, after abandoning them with a note left on the kitchen table, he had suddenly decided he wanted to be a father. Thoughts raced through my head. What would I tell the children? How could I explain that their father, whom they barely remembered, had suddenly returned and wanted to take them away from the only home they knew? "Grandpa," Ensley's voice pulled me out of my dark thoughts. "Is dinner ready?" "I'm coming, sweetheart," I replied, tucking the letter into my pocket. "I'm coming." I took a deep breath of the evening air, trying to calm my wildly beating heart. Whatever Braxton had in mind, I would not let him destroy these children's lives. They were my salvation after Sybil's death, and I would fight for them until my last breath. With that determination, I returned to the house, to my grandchildren, to my family. The notice of the start of the custody dispute burned in my pocket, but I forced myself to smile. We had dinner as usual, discussing the past day, plans for the weekend, Ensley's new drawing, a normal family evening. But I knew that our lives were about to change, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The morning was difficult. I had hardly slept, tossing and turning all night, going over possible scenarios for the upcoming conversation with Braxton in my head. Octavia came home from prom around midnight, happy and excited. She talked about dancing, her friends, her plans for the summer. I listened, smiled, nodded in the right places, trying not to show my concern. She deserved this moment of joy. Now, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, I wondered how to tell the children about their father's return. They hadn't seen him in 10 years. Ensley hardly remembered him. She was only 3 when he left. Ambrose remembered a little more, but in his memory, his father was more of a vague figure than a real person. Only Octavia really knew Braxton, but even her memories were childish and incomplete. "You're up early, Grandpa." Octavia appeared in the kitchen, yawning. Her hair was tousled, traces of yesterday's makeup on her face. Even like this, sleepy and disheveled, she was the spitting image of her mother Helena in her youth. The same grace, the same expressive eyes. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, getting up to pour her some coffee. "How did you sleep after the party?" "Fine," she said, accepting the cup with a grateful smile. "Although Layla and I talked until 3 in the morning, we couldn't stop." "What did you talk about?" I asked, though my thoughts were far away. "College, mostly. What life will be like away from home." She took a sip and looked at me over the cup. "Grandpa, is something wrong? You seem tense." I was always amazed by her insight. Nothing could be hidden from Octavia. "There's something I need to tell you," I began cautiously, "but let's wait until the twins wake up." I don't want to have to repeat myself. She frowned but didn't insist. Instead, she started making breakfast, eggs and bacon, like she did every Saturday. We worked together in cozy silence. I sliced bread, she scrambled eggs. A normal Saturday morning, the last normal morning before the storm. The twins came down around 10, sleepy and disheveled. Ambrose immediately reached for the orange juice in the refrigerator, while Ensley plopped down on a chair, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Smells good," Ambrose said, pouring juice into a glass. "I'm starving." "Sit down, everyone," I said, placing plates on the table. "We need to talk." They sat down, glancing at each other. Something in my voice made them wary. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Your father is back," I said bluntly, deciding not to beat around the bush. "Braxton, he was at Octavia's graduation, and he wants to see you." Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me with varying degrees of shock and disbelief. "Dad?" Ensley was the first to break the silence, her voice quiet and uncertain. "The one in the photo?" "Yes, sweetheart," I nodded. "The one in the photo. But he abandoned us." Ambrose frowned, his childish face suddenly becoming hard adult. "Why would he come back?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But he contacted a lawyer and—" The doorbell interrupted me. We all jumped as if from a gunshot. Octavia looked at me with wide eyes. "Is it him?" she whispered. I didn't answer, just got up and went to the door. My heart was pounding so hard that it seemed to echo throughout the house. 2 people stood on the doorstep, a tall, dark-skinned man in an expensive suit and an elegant woman with immaculate hair and a cold stare. Braxton and presumably his lawyer, or his new wife, or both. "Dad," Braxton said with a slight smile, as if we had parted yesterday, not 10 years ago. "You haven't changed a bit." That was a lie. I had changed. I had aged 10 years raising the children he had abandoned. "You've changed," I replied, looking him up and down. Expensive suit, gold watch, manicured hands. Braxton had indeed changed outwardly, from a skinny, nervous young man with the restless eyes of a drug addict to a well-groomed, confident man. "Come in." He entered, the woman following him, her high heels clicking on the wooden floor of the hallway. They walked into the living room, and I closed the door, feeling a knot of foreboding in my throat. "This is Pearl," Braxton introduced his companion. "My wife. She's also my lawyer." "Mr. Carmichael," Pearl extended her perfectly manicured hand to me. Her handshake was firm and professional. "It's a pleasure to meet you." I shook her hand but said nothing. There was little pleasant about this meeting. "Are the kids in the kitchen?" Braxton asked, looking around the living room. His gaze lingered on the wall with the photos. 10 years of life he had missed. Ensley's first day of school, Ambrose with his saxophone, Octavia with her science fair medal. "Yes," I replied. "They're having breakfast. I just told them you were back." "And how did they react?" There was something like concern in his voice, but I wasn't sure if it was genuine. "What do you think?" I couldn't resist the sarcasm. "You disappeared from their lives for 10 years. They're in shock." Braxton sighed and ran his hand through his closely cropped hair. "Listen, Dad, I know it's complicated, but I've changed. I've been clean for 5 years. I have a good job, a stable marriage. I want to make amends for my mistakes." "Make up for your mistake," I repeated slowly. "You can't make up for 10 years of absence in a single day, Braxton." "I know," he said, lowering his eyes, "but I have to try. They're my children. I'm their father." "Father?" I echoed, feeling anger rising inside me. "A father doesn't abandon his children with a note on the kitchen table. A father doesn't disappear for 10 years without a single word. A father doesn't—" "Mr. Carmichael," Pearl interjected, her voice soft but firm, "we understand how you feel. But Braxton has really changed. He's been in rehab and has been working as a financial advisor for 5 years. We have our own house in a good neighborhood, big enough for 3 children." "They're not moving in with you," I snapped. "This is their home. This is where their school is, their friends, their life." "That's not entirely true," Pearl objected. "By law, a biological parent has priority custody if they can provide adequate care for the children. And Braxton can now." "Adequate care," I almost spat out the words. Where was he when Ensley had pneumonia and was lying in bed with a high fever for 3 days? Where was he when Ambrose broke his arm falling off his bike? Where was he at all the parent-teacher conferences, all the performances and competitions? "Dad, please," Braxton raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I know I screwed up. I know I missed a lot. But I want to make it up to them. Give them a better life." "A better life?" I asked bitterly. Than the one they have now? No offense, Dad, but yes. Braxton looked around. Our house was modest but cozy. Second-hand furniture, worn carpets, walls in need of a fresh coat of paint. We lived modestly on my pension and what I earned tuning pianos. I can give them more. Private school for Ensley and Ambrose. College for Octavia without student loans. Octavia has a scholarship, I said proudly. She got into Emory, full scholarship. That's wonderful, Braxton nodded. She's always been a smart girl. But college isn't just about education. It's housing, books, clothes, entertainment. I can provide all that without a scholarship. Grandpa, Octavia's quiet voice made us all turn around. She stood in the living room doorway, pale as a sheet. Behind her loomed the frightened faces of the twins. Is that Dad? Braxton slowly stood up, his face softening at the sight of his daughter. Octavia, he said tenderly, you've grown so much. You're as beautiful as your mother. Octavia didn't move. Her gaze was cold and appraising. Why are you here? She asked bluntly. After all these years. I came for you, Braxton replied, taking a step forward. For you, for Ambrose, for Ensley. I want you to live with me. I want to be your father again. Ensley peeked out from behind her sister, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Ambrose stood slightly to the side, his arms crossed over his chest, his posture defensive, hostile. You can't just come in here and take us away, Octavia said, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. We're not your possessions. We're people. We have our own lives. I know, sweetheart. Braxton took another step toward the children. I don't expect you to accept me right away, but I want you to give me a chance. I've changed. I'm not the man I was 10 years ago. You abandoned us, Ambrose said quietly. His voice was full of accusation. Grandpa would never have done that. Braxton sighed, his shoulders slumping. I know, son. I made a terrible mistake. I was sick back then. Drugs, gambling. I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone you. But things are different now. I'm clean. I have a good job, a home. We have a home too, Ensley said stubbornly, stepping forward. Here, with Grandpa. I felt my heart fill with pride for these children. They stood together, protecting each other and me, my small but strong family. I understand your feelings, Pearl interjected, her voice professionally soft. But as Braxton's lawyer, I must inform you that he has every legal right to custody of you. You are his biological children, and if the court decides that he can provide you with adequate living conditions, you will live with him. The court? Octavia asked. You're suing Grandpa. We have initiated proceedings to restore Braxton's parental rights, Pearl replied. This is standard procedure. But we don't want to live with him, Ambrose exclaimed. We want to stay with Grandpa. Unfortunately, at your age, the court is not obliged to take your wishes into account, Pearl said calmly, as if explaining the obvious to small children, especially considering that your grandfather was never your legal guardian. What? Octavia turned to me. Grandpa, what is she talking about? I clenched my fists, feeling anger rising inside me. I have all the necessary documents, I said firmly. Helena transferred custody to me before she died. Do you have a court order? Pearl asked, raising an eyebrow. An official appointment as their guardian? I have a letter from Helena, I replied, and her death certificate. Braxton abandoned the children and left no contact information. I was the only relative who could take care of them. I'm afraid that's not enough, Pearl shook her head. Without an official court order, you are not their legal guardian. In fact, by taking the children without their father's consent, you have committed kidnapping. Kidnapping? I couldn't believe my ears. I saved these children. Braxton abandoned them. He left them in your care temporarily, Pearl countered. Nowhere in the note does it say that he is relinquishing his parental rights. 10 years, I exclaimed, feeling the blood rush to my face in indignation. He hasn't been around for 10 years. Not a phone call, not a letter. Dad, calm down. Braxton raised his hands. We don't want to make a scene in front of the children. Let's discuss this like adults. Adults don't abandon their children, I snapped. Adults don't disappear for 10 years and then come back with demands. I'm not here with demands, Braxton objected. I'm here for my children. They are my family. No, Octavia said firmly. Our family is here. Grandpa's our family. Braxton sighed and rubbed his nose. I understand that you're angry with me. You have every right to be, but I've changed, really. I want to make things right, to give you what you deserve. Like what? Ambrose asked defiantly. Money? Expensive toys? We don't need that. No, son, Braxton shook his head. A family, a real family, a father and a mother. We already have a family, Ensley repeated stubbornly, and we don't need another one. Pearl exchanged a glance with Braxton, then opened her briefcase and took out a folder with documents. Mr. Carmichael, she said to me, we wanted to settle this amicably, to give you a chance to say goodbye to the children, to pack their things. But if you insist on confrontation, we will be forced to take legal action. You will not take my children? I stood up straight, feeling the years fall from my shoulders. At that moment, I was not a 74-year-old man. I was a father protecting his family. They are not your children, Pearl said softly. They are Braxton's children. And according to the law, to hell with the law. I couldn't hold back. Where was the law when these children cried at night, calling for their father? Where was the law when I took Ensley to the hospital with a fever of 104? Where was the law when I worked 2 jobs to provide for them? Dad, please, Braxton took a step toward me. We can resolve this peacefully. I don't want to take your children away from you completely. You can see them, but they have to live with me. I'm their father. You're not their father, I spat. You're a biological donor, nothing more. A father is someone who raises children, who teaches them, who supports them. I've been their father all these years. Me! Enough! Octavia suddenly shouted, her voice ringing with tension. Stop talking about us as if we weren't here. We are people, not things to be divided up. Everyone fell silent, stunned by her outburst. Octavia stood up straight, her eyes burning with determination. We're not going with you, she said, looking straight at Braxton. You can sue, you can do whatever you want, but we're staying with Grandpa. Sweetheart. Braxton took a step toward her, but she backed away. You don't understand. I can give you a better life. You'll have everything you want. We already have everything we need, Octavia said firmly. Grandpa gave us the most important things, love and care. And you're just a stranger in an expensive suit. Braxton's face contorted with pain and anger. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. You turned them against me, he hissed. All these years you poisoned their minds with lies about me. I never spoke ill of you, I replied honestly. They came to their own conclusions. Liar! Braxton suddenly shouted, his face contorted with rage. You've always hated me. You always thought I wasn't good enough, and now you've stolen my children. Braxton, calm down. Pearl put her hand on his shoulder, but he shook her off. You're a thief, he shouted in my face. You stole my children and their mother's money. You think I don't know about the trust fund? About the money Helena left for the children? Where did it go, huh? What money? I asked, confused. What are you talking about? Don't pretend, Braxton growled. Helena received insurance money after her father died. $200,000. She put it in a trust fund for the children. Where is that money? I was stunned. Helena had never told me about any money or trust fund. When she died of an overdose, she barely had enough for her funeral. I don't know anything about any money, I said firmly. And if you came here for the money and not the children, that explains a lot. Braxton turned red with rage. You stole not only my children, but their inheritance, he shouted. But this will end? We'll meet in court, old man, and I'll take what is rightfully mine. With that, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. Pearl gave me a cold look, gathered her papers, and followed him, her heels clicking. We stood in deafening silence, me and 3 frightened children whose lives had just been turned upside down. The Fulton County Courthouse towered majestically over the square, a massive gray granite structure with columns and wide steps. I had parked my car nearby and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, unable to bring myself to get out. My old fingers turned white with tension. Grandpa, it's time, Octavia said quietly, placing her hand on mine. Carlton is waiting for us at the entrance. I nodded, unclenching my fingers with difficulty. A week had passed since Braxton burst into our lives. A week of endless phone calls, consultations with lawyers, and sleepless nights. Fortunately, I had Carlton Price, my longtime friend and one of the best family lawyers in Alpharetta. Is everyone ready? I asked, glancing at the children in the back seat. Ambrose nodded, his usually lively face serious and withdrawn. Ensley clutched a worn teddy bear in her hands, a childhood habit she had returned to in recent days. They were both dressed in their best clothes, their hair neatly combed. We got out of the car and headed for the courthouse. Carlton was waiting for us at the foot of a wide staircase. A tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed gray beard and attentive eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Edmund, he shook my hand. Children, he nodded to my grandchildren. How are you feeling? Lousy, I replied honestly. But we're ready. Good, Carlton put his hand on my shoulder. Remember what we talked about. Stay calm, don't rise to any provocations. Judge Holloway is a fair person. She will be guided by the interests of the children. I nodded, though inside I was gripped with fear. What if my calm wasn't enough? What if the judge decided that Braxton, with his money and young wife, could give the children a better life than an old man on a pension? We climbed the steps and entered the cool lobby of the courthouse. After being checked by security and registered, Carlton led us down a long corridor to courtroom number 103. Here they are. Braxton's low voice made me turn around. He was standing a few meters away from us with Pearl and another man in a business suit. All three looked like they had stepped off the cover of a magazine. Perfect hairstyles, expensive suits, confident postures. Next to them, I felt ridiculous in my well-worn suit, bought for Sybil's funeral. Carlton discreetly squeezed my elbow, reminding me to stay calm. I took a deep breath and nodded to my grandchildren, nudging them toward the entrance to the conference room. Dad, Braxton called out, stepping forward. Can I have a word in private? I hesitated, but Carlton whispered, Go on, I'll keep an eye on the kids. Reluctantly, I stepped aside. Braxton approached, his face calm, but his eyes betraying his tension. It's not too late to settle this peacefully, he said quietly. No trial, no public humiliation. How do you envision that? I asked. Simple, he shrugged. You voluntarily hand over the children and the money from the trust fund to me. In exchange, I won't press charges against you for kidnapping and embezzlement. I could barely contain my laughter. I'll say it again. I don't know anything about any trust fund, and I won't give you the children. Then be prepared for a messy fight. His voice became harsh. My wife is the best family lawyer in the state. She will turn your life upside down. Are you threatening me? I straightened up, looking him straight in the eye. I raised you without any help after your mother died, and I raised your children after you abandoned them. You think I'm afraid of you or your lawyers? Braxton shook his head. I didn't want it to come to this, Dad, but you're leaving me no choice. With that, he turned and walked back to his lawyers. I returned to Carlton and the children, my heart pounding in my chest. What did he want? Carlton asked. To offer a deal, I replied quietly. I refused. We entered the courtroom, a spacious room with wooden benches, a judge's bench, and seats for the jury. Although there was no jury in this case, the empty room gradually filled with people. The court clerk, the judge's assistant, the bailiff. Braxton and his lawyers took their places at the table on the left. Carlton, the children, and I sat at the table on the right. What happens next? Octavia whispered, holding my hand tightly. The judge will hear both sides, I explained. Then he'll make a decision. Will they ask us? Ambrose fidgeted nervously with his tie. Will they ask us who we want to live with? Possibly, I replied cautiously. But at your age, the judge is not obliged to take your opinion into account. But that's not fair on us, exclaimed Ambrose, and Carlton raised his hand warningly. Quiet, boy. You must behave quietly and respectfully in court. Ambrose pouted but fell silent. Ensley hugged her teddy bear tighter, her eyes darting restlessly around the room. All rise, court is in session. Presiding is the Honorable Judge Eleanor Holloway, announced the bailiff, and everyone stood up. Judge Holloway entered through the side door, a tall, middle-aged woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and piercing eyes. She sat down at the bench, looked around at those present, and nodded. Be seated. There was a rustling of clothes, a creaking of chairs, and then silence again. The judge opened the folder of documents in front of her, put on her glasses, and began to look through the papers. Case number 1948/25, she announced. Carmichael v. Carmichael, regarding the custody of minors Octavia Carmichael, Ambrose Carmichael, and Ensley Carmichael. She looked up from the papers and looked first at Braxton, then at me. Plaintiff, state your name. Braxton stood up with Pearl. Braxton Carmichael, Your Honor, father of the children. I am represented by Pearl Carmichael, my wife and attorney, and Randall Higgins. Defendant? I stood up, feeling my knees tremble. Edmund Carmichael, Your Honor, Braxton's father and the children's grandfather. I am represented by Carlton Price. The judge made a note and looked around the courtroom again. I see the children are present in the courtroom. That's unusual for a first hearing. Your Honor, Carlton interjected, rising. The children insisted on being here. They want their voices to be heard. The judge frowned but nodded. I understand. However, I remind you that under Georgia law, the opinions of children under the age of 14 are not a determining factor in custody decisions. We understand, Your Honor, Carlton replied. The judge looked over the documents in front of her again. So, the essence of the case is this. Braxton Carmichael, the biological father of the children, is seeking full custody. Edmund Carmichael, the children's grandfather, objects to this. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, both lawyers replied simultaneously. Good. Let's start with the plaintiff. Ms. Carmichael, please state your position. Pearl stood up, straightened her jacket, and smiled at the judge. A professional, confident smile. Your Honor, the case is extremely clear from a legal standpoint. My client, Braxton Carmichael, is the biological father of 3 minor children. He never formally relinquished his parental rights. 10 years ago, while going through a difficult period in his life, he temporarily left the children in the care of his father, Edmund Carmichael. However, Mr. Edmund Carmichael was never appointed the children's legal guardian. There is no court order transferring custody to him. Pearl paused and demonstratively turned the page in her notes. Over the past 10 years, my client has completely changed his life. He has undergone rehabilitation for drug addiction and has been completely clean for 5 years, as confirmed by regular tests. He has built a successful career as a financial advisor with an annual income of over $150,000. He has created a strong family. We are ready and able to provide our children with everything they need: a quality education, medical care, and psychological support for adaptation. She turned and looked at me with a cold smile. At the same time, Mr. Edmund Carmichael is an elderly man of 74 with a limited income consisting of a pension and occasional earnings. He lives in a small house where 3 growing children are forced to share one room. Moreover, her voice became harsher, we have reason to believe that Mr. Edmund Carmichael embezzled funds from a trust fund established by the children's mother before her death. The sum of $200,000 intended for the children's education and needs has disappeared. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling anger rising inside me. Carlton placed a warning hand on my shoulder. Therefore, Your Honor, Pearl continued, we ask the court to restore Braxton Carmichael's parental rights in full, grant him full custody of the children, and order an audit of Edmund Carmichael's financial activities in relation to the alleged trust fund. She sat down, smiling with satisfaction. Braxton patted her hand, giving me a triumphant look. Thank you, nodded the judge. Mr. Price, it's your turn. Carlton stood up, tall and straight despite his age. Unlike the flamboyant Pearl, he looked simple but dignified. Your Honor, he began in his deep, calm voice. 10 years ago, Braxton Carmichael abandoned 3 small children. Octavia was 6, and the twins, Ambrose and Ensley, were 3. Their mother, Helena, had died shortly before from a drug overdose. Braxton didn't just temporarily leave the children, as my colleague claims. He disappeared. No phone calls, no letters, no child support. Nothing for 10 years. Carlton took a piece of paper out of his folder. Here's a copy of the note Braxton left for his father. I quote, Dad, I can't do this anymore. Take care of them. Maybe you'll do better than I did. End of quote. No mention of this being a temporary request. No contact information. No promise to return. He handed the copy of the note to the judge, who studied it carefully. Edmund Carmichael, an elderly widower who had just lost his wife, took responsibility for 3 small children. He did not seek this responsibility, but he accepted it without hesitation. Over the past 10 years, he has created a home for these children full of love and care. Yes, it is a modest home. Yes, his income is limited, But the children have never wanted for anything. They are well-dressed, well-fed, and well-educated. Octavia, the eldest granddaughter, has received a full scholarship to Emory University. Carlton glanced around the courtroom. As for the allegations of embezzlement from a trust fund, this is nothing more than an attempt to discredit my client. The plaintiff has no evidence of the existence of such a fund. There are no bank statements, no will, no witness testimony, nothing but unsubstantiated allegations. He turned to the children sitting next to me. But the most important thing, Your Honor, is not legal technicalities or financial issues. The most important thing is the well-being of these children. They don't know Braxton Carmichael. To the younger ones, he is just a vague memory. To the older one, he is the man who abandoned them in a difficult time. They don't want to live with him. They want to stay with their grandfather, who has been their father all these years. He returned to the table. Therefore, Your Honor, we ask the court to consider not only the legal aspects, but also the human ones. We ask that the children remain with Edmund Carmichael, appointing him their official guardian. The judge made notes in her papers, then looked up. Mr. Edmund Carmichael, please approach the witness stand. I stood up, feeling my legs tremble. The bailiff led me to a small podium and administered the oath. I sat down, wiping my sweaty palms on my pants. Mr. Carmichael, Carlton began, tell the court under what circumstances you became the guardian of your grandchildren. I cleared my throat, trying to make my voice sound firm. It happened 10 years ago, shortly after the death of my wife, Sybil. Helena, Braxton's wife, had died of an overdose a few months earlier. Braxton was struggling to cope with these losses. He had problems with drugs and gambling. One morning, I woke up to find a note on the kitchen table and 3 frightened children. Braxton had disappeared without leaving any contact information. I tried to find him. I called his friends, his colleagues. I even hired a private investigator. No trace. He just vanished. And what did you do? The only thing I could, I shrugged. I took care of the children. They were so young, so scared. Octavia asked about her mom and dad every day. The twins cried at night. I couldn't abandon them. Did you formally adopt them? I shook my head. No, I didn't think about it at the time. All I could think about was how to feed the children, how to provide them with everything they needed. I had a small pension and some savings. Then I found a job as a piano tuner. It allowed me to work flexible hours and be close to the children. Have you ever heard of the trust fund Helena set up for the children? Never, I replied firmly. Helena was a difficult person. She had drug problems even before Sybil's death. After my wife died, it only got worse. When she died, she barely had enough money for the funeral. I never heard of any trust fund or insurance. Carlton nodded. Mr. Carmichael, did Helena leave you anything before she died? Any documents, letters, things for the children? I froze. Here it was. The moment I had been dreading. The envelope. Carlton knew about it. I had told him about it during one of our first meetings. But I hadn't told him everything. What was in the envelope? I swallowed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the children tense up, especially Octavia. They had never seen the contents of the envelope. I didn't dare show it to them. There was a letter from Helena. She asked me to take care of the children if anything happened to her. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Mr. Carmichael, Carlton continued, is there anything else in that envelope that is relevant to the case? I looked at my grandchildren. Octavia kept her eyes on me, her face tense. The twins sat next to her, holding hands, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The contents of the envelope could change everything. But at what cost? Was I willing to destroy the children's image of their parents? Was I willing to show them the dark, ugly side of the past? Yes, I finally replied. There is something else, but I'm not sure the children should know about it. Your Honor, Pearl interjected, standing up, I request that the witness be required to produce this envelope and its contents. The judge looked at me. Mr. Carmichael, do you still have that envelope? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. It's at my house, in the safe. I demand that it be presented to the court, Pearl insisted. I agree, the judge nodded. Mr. Carmichael, you must produce this envelope at the next hearing. Yes, Your Honor, I replied, feeling my heart sink. The envelope lay on the table between me and Carlton. Yellowed with age, the ink faded. For 10 years, I had kept it in my home safe, taking it out only occasionally to confirm that it was still there, still holding its terrible secret. Are you sure you want to do this? Carlton looked at me over his glasses. We were sitting in his office waiting for the final hearing to begin. No, I replied honestly, but I have no choice. Braxton won't back down. His lawyer wife found some testimony about the trust fund. You heard her at the last hearing? She's determined to make me look like a thief. Carlton nodded, running his fingers over the envelope without opening it. At my request, he hadn't looked at the contents yet. I wanted him to see everything with me when the time came, when I found the strength to open this door to the past. Where are the children? Carlton asked. In the reception room with the secretary. I didn't want them to see this before the time was right. You understand that the contents of the envelope will become part of the court record? That the children will probably learn the truth? I sighed, feeling the weight of all these years pressing down on my shoulders. Yes, and it's killing me, Carlton. I tried so hard to protect them from the truth, to give them a normal childhood, without the shadows of the past. And now you're protecting their future, Carlton said firmly. If this envelope really contains what you say it does, Braxton should never be around these children. I nodded, knowing he was right. With a heavy heart, I walked over to the window. Life was bustling below, people rushing about their business, unaware of the drama unfolding in the small office above them. Life that would continue after my little family had gone through this ordeal. It's time, Carlton said, glancing at his watch. The trial starts in half an hour. I took the envelope, carefully placed it in my jacket's inside pocket, and went out into the reception area. The children were sitting on the sofa, Octavia between the twins, holding their hands. All three were dressed in their best clothes. All three looked frightened and determined at the same time. Grandpa, Octavia stood up to meet me. Is everything okay? Yes, sweetheart, I hugged her, feeling the fragility of her body in my arms. Just discussing the details with Mr. Price. Is this the last hearing? Ambrose asked, nervously fiddling with his tie. After this, can we go home and forget about everything? I looked into his eyes, a copy of his mother's eyes full of hope and fear. I hope so, son. I hope so. We left the office and got into Carlton's car. On the way to the courthouse, I looked at my grandchildren, how they had grown in those 10 years. From frightened little children, they had become strong, intelligent, kind people. Despite all the difficulties, despite the absence of their parents, they had grown up to be good people, and I couldn't let Braxton ruin their lives. Reporters met us at the courthouse. Somehow the case had attracted the attention of the local media. The story of an elderly black man fighting for custody of his grandchildren against their wealthy biological father had sparked interest. Carlton led us through the crowd, not answering questions, shielding the children from the cameras. Braxton and Pearl were already seated in the courtroom, both dressed in impeccable, expensive suits. Next to them sat their second lawyer, Randall Higgins, a man with a shark-like smile and cold eyes. They were discussing something in hushed tones, but fell silent when we entered. Braxton gave me a smug look, then turned his eyes to the children. Octavia turned away. Ensley squeezed her sister's hand tighter. Only Ambrose looked directly at his father, his eyes defiant. All rise! Court is in session! Presiding is the Honorable Judge Eleanor Holloway. We stood up. The judge entered, stern, majestic, with piercing eyes that seemed to see right through everyone present. She sat down, nodded to the bailiff, and he announced the start of the hearing. Case number 1948/25, the judge announced. Carmichael v. Carmichael, regarding the establishment of guardianship over minors, Octavia Carmichael, Ambrose Carmichael, and Ensley Carmichael. Final hearing. She looked around the courtroom. At the last hearing, the defendant, Edmund Carmichael, was instructed to present to the court an envelope given to him by Helena Carmichael, the children's mother, before her death. Mr. Carmichael, do you have that envelope? I stood up, feeling my knees tremble. Yes, Your Honor. Please present it to the court. I took the envelope from my inside pocket and handed it to the bailiff, who took it to the judge. Judge Holloway carefully took the yellowed envelope and examined the inscription on it. To Edmund, open if anything happens to me, written in Helena's trembling hand. Was the envelope sealed when you received it? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, I replied. I only opened it after Helena's death, as she requested. The judge nodded and carefully opened the already unsealed envelope. She began to take out the contents, several sheets of paper folded together and a few photographs. I closed my eyes for a moment, not wanting to see those photos again. But I knew each one by heart. The bruises on Helena's body, the frightened eyes of little Octavia hiding behind the furniture, Helena's broken arm in a cast, cigarette burns on her skin. Judge Holloway looked through the documents, and as she read, her face grew increasingly grim. She looked up at Braxton, then returned to the documents. Finally, she put the papers and photographs aside. "I would like to study these materials in my chambers," she announced. "I'm calling a 30-minute recess. Counsel for both sides, come with me." She stood up, gathered the documents, and walked out through a side door. Carlton and Braxton's lawyers followed her. We remained in the courtroom, me, the children, and Braxton and Pearl. "What's in that envelope, Grandpa?" Octavia asked quietly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "The truth, sweetheart. The truth I hoped you would never have to know." "About Mom?" Her voice trembled. "About Mom. About Dad. About why she was afraid for you." Braxton stood up abruptly and walked over to our table. His face was contorted with rage. "What did you tell them, old man?" he hissed. "What lies are you spreading about me?" I met his gaze calmly, though inside I was seething with anger. "I didn't tell them anything. Unlike you, I didn't want to ruin their childhood with bitter truths." "What truths?" Ambrose stood up and came to stand beside me. At 13, he was almost as tall as me, thin but determined. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing, son," Braxton said quickly, his tone softening. "Your grandfather is just trying to turn you against me. But soon we'll be together, and you'll see how I've changed." "I've changed, I swear." "People don't change that radically," Octavia said quietly, "especially those who are capable of abandoning their own children." Braxton's face contorted with anger again, but before he could respond, the door opened and the judge and lawyers returned to the courtroom. We took our seats. Judge Holloway looked serious, her eyes cold as she looked at Braxton. "Based on the evidence presented, I am ready to render a decision in this case," she announced. "But first, I have a few questions. Mr. Braxton Carmichael, please approach the witness stand." Braxton stood up, squared his shoulders, and walked to the podium. He looked confident, but I could see the tension in his eyes. "Mr. Carmichael," the judge began, "are you familiar with the contents of the envelope presented by your father?" "No, Your Honor," Braxton replied. "I have no idea what's in there." "Interesting," the judge said, picking up one of the photos, "because here is a photo of your ex-wife Helena with bruises that, according to her letter, were inflicted by you. There are medical reports of a broken arm, rib injuries, cigarette burns. There are witness statements from neighbors who heard screams. There is even a police report, although the charges were dropped when Helena refused to testify." Braxton turned pale but quickly regained his composure. "That's a lie, Your Honor. Helena was a drug addict. She often fell and injured herself while high, and then she blamed me. I never laid a hand on her." "What about the children?" the judge asked calmly. "Of course not," Braxton exclaimed. "I loved my children. I still love them." "Then why did you disappear for 10 years? Why didn't you call, write, or send child support?" Braxton lowered his eyes. "I was sick, Your Honor. Drugs, depression after Helena's death. I couldn't take care of the children in that state, but I knew my father would take care of them, and I was right. Look how they've grown up." "Indeed," nodded the judge. "They've grown up to be wonderful children, thanks to your father's care." She turned the page in her notes. The envelope also contains a document signed by Helena Carmichael a week before her death. In it, she transfers full custody of the children to Edmund Carmichael in the event of her death. The document is notarized. Were you aware of this?" Braxton froze, then slowly shook his head. "No, Your Honor. I was not aware." "Another interesting document," the judge continued, leafing through the papers, "is a bank statement from the trust fund Helena set up for the children. According to it, all the money was withdrawn from the account the day before Helena's death. The signature on the withdrawal document does not belong to Helena. This has been confirmed by a handwriting analysis commissioned by your father immediately after her death. The signature is forged, and the expert claims that the handwriting is similar to yours, Mr. Carmichael." Silence fell over the courtroom. I looked at my son, feeling not triumph, but deep, boundless sadness. What made him this way? Where did I go wrong in raising him? That's, that's not true, Braxton muttered, but there was no confidence left in his voice. Mr. Edmund Carmichael, the judge turned to me. Please come forward. I stood up and walked to the podium. Braxton returned to his seat, avoiding my gaze. Mr. Carmichael, the judge asked when I took my seat, why didn't you present these documents earlier? Why didn't you go to the police with charges of document forgery and theft? I took a deep breath. I didn't want the children to know, Your Honor. I didn't want them to find out what kind of man their father was. They already lost their mother and went through his departure. I didn't want to take away their good memories of their father. As for the money, I was able to provide them with everything they needed. Maybe not as luxuriously as I could have with that money, but they never went hungry. They were always clothed. They got an education. The money wasn't worth traumatizing the children even more. The judge looked at me with a long, searching gaze. You are an unusual man, Mr. Carmichael, she finally said. Not many people would do that for children who aren't even their own. They are mine, Your Honor, I said firmly. Maybe not by blood, but by love, definitely. I raised them, saw them take their first steps in school, nursed them when they were sick, rejoiced in their successes. They are my family. The judge nodded, then looked at the children. Do they know about this? She asked quietly, pointing to the envelope. About its contents? I shook my head. Not yet, I replied. I always hoped they would never have to know. The judge sighed, looked through the documents again, then set them aside. I am ready to render my decision, she announced. Based on the evidence presented and the testimony of the witnesses, the court rules that full custody of the minors Octavia Carmichael, Ambrose Carmichael, and Ensley Carmichael shall be transferred to their grandfather, Edmund Carmichael, until they reach the age of majority. Braxton Carmichael is prohibited from approaching the children or their place of residence within a distance of 100 meters without the written permission of Edmund Carmichael or until the children reach the age of 18. She looked at Braxton. Furthermore, I am referring the case to the prosecutor's office for possible criminal prosecution for document forgery and theft of trust funds. The hearing is adjourned. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom. There was a moment of silence, then Braxton jumped up, his face contorted with rage. This is unfair, he shouted. They're my children, mine. You stole them from me. He turned to me, pointing his finger. You've always hated me. You always thought I wasn't good enough. And now you've turned my own children against me. Pearl tried to hold him back, but Braxton shook off her hand. I won't give up, he continued to shout. I'll appeal. I'll find the best lawyers. I'll prove these documents are forged. Mr. Carmichael, the judge's sharp voice interrupted his tirade. One more word and I will add contempt of court to the judgment. Sit down. Braxton fell silent, breathing heavily, but sat down. His eyes burned with hatred as he looked at me. Court is adjourned, the judge repeated and left. The children and I remained seated at the table, unable to believe it was over. Carlton patted me on the shoulder, smiling broadly. Congratulations, Edmund. You won. I nodded but felt no joy, only emptiness and endless fatigue. Braxton stood up and after giving us one last furious look, quickly left the room. Pearl and Randall gathered their papers and followed him without saying a word. Grandpa, Octavia took my hand. Is it over? Can we go home? Yes, sweetheart, I tried to smile. It's over, we're going home. What was in that envelope? Ambrose asked. Why was the judge so angry with Dad? I sighed, looking into my grandchildren's eyes. Eyes full of questions that would have to be answered. Let's talk at home, I said. It's a long conversation. We left the courtroom on a bright, sunny day. Reporters surrounded us again, but Carlton shooed them away, saying we would not be giving any comments. He drove us home, hugged each of the children, and shook my hand. If you need any help, call me anytime, he said. Thank you for everything, I replied sincerely. I don't know how I can ever repay you. We'll discuss that later, he smiled. You have more important things to do right now. He nodded toward the children, who were already climbing the steps to our house, and I realized he was right. I was about to have the most difficult conversation of my life. I had to tell them the truth I had hidden for so long in an attempt to protect them, but now they had to know. They deserved to know why their father had disappeared from their lives, why their mother was afraid for them, why I had done everything I could to keep Braxton away from them. I looked at our house, modest but cozy, full of love and memories. We had lived here as a family for 10 years. 10 years of joys and sorrows, laughter and tears, struggles and small victories. We had been through a lot, and this storm would pass too. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength for the conversation ahead. The truth would be painful, but it would set us free. We will start a new chapter in our lives, without the shadow of Braxton, without the fear that he will return and destroy what we have built together. We will move on, me and my grandchildren, my family, my heart.